Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 231, the final 2020 episode. Yes, it has been quite the year for Shop Talk Live. We've gone remote, we've figured out all sorts of systems and ways of recording this podcast, and we've had a lot of guests on because of that. And thank you to each and every one of you for sticking with us while we grew, honestly. I think that this podcast is better because of the distancing than it was before. We're able to have on more guests and just spread the love a little bit more, and it's a wonderful thing. With that in mind, this is the second time Mike and I had to record this episode, so we're still figuring it out. We got it this time, though. So we've got a fun episode for you. We discuss router tables and whether they're worth dedicating shop space to, oddball scenarios for panel glue-ups, and we answer a couple of wood questions about hickory and butternut. So again, thank you to the listeners of Shop Talk Live, the subscribers of Fine Woodworking Magazine, the members of finewoodworking.com. Without all of you, we don't have a day job, and we sincerely appreciate your support. And cheers to 2020. Good riddance. Back in a minute after a word from our sponsors. Whether you're working in the shop or on the job site, it's not a debate that dust extraction is incredibly important. That's why Festool USA has continued to innovate ways to deliver top-tier dust extraction solutions, as best seen in Festool's new CT48 AC. This machine is designed to capture high volumes of dust and keep the job progressing, with its 12.7 gallon capacity, and continue operating at its peak efficiency with its automatic cleaning mechanism. The versatile CT48 AC syncs with Festool tools via Bluetooth for seamless operation, and is also OSHA Table 1 compliant for materials containing silica dust, and it is well suited for a diverse set of job site tasks, while limiting downtime for emptying filter bags due to its large capacity. Backed by the company's 3-year wear and tear warranty, the CT48 AC is built for the toughest demands. For information, visit festoolusa.com/fall2020.
Still waiting to subscribe to Fine Woodworking? Now's the time. Follow us on social and be sure to visit finewoodworking.com frequently, as we will have some pretty incredible sales coming your way this holiday season.
So yeah, we recorded yesterday, and we even had a backup that failed. So here we are, snow day.
There you go. Yeah.
I guarantee you my son's going to walk in the middle of this recording.
That's okay.
He's outside playing in the snow. He's going to tell me about some crazy thing he did.
So now, is he a digger or a builder in the snow?
He, I will just throw all the snow with the snowblower in a huge pile, and he's just sliding down it right now.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, it might be a little too much for him to dig right now.
All right.
We'll see. But but you know what I got to thinking about though?
What's that?
The snowblower got me thinking about dust collection systems and how someone needs to invent a dust collection system with like an auger thing that empties the dust bin out. I haven't really thought this through, obviously, but there's something there.
Okay.
You're not buying it.
I guess not. No.
I just think that there's like the emptying of the bin is just such a hassle.
Yes, it is. I agree.
That, yeah, I'm overcomplicating it. Forget it.
No.
I shouldn't snowblow and think about woodworking at the same time.
No. In my dream world, I'd have a dust collector where that just ported out like a hole in the wall or something, and I just had this mound of sawdust collecting in the back of my shop.
Yeah.
And just put a little sign up in your yard that says free sawdust, and that's it.
Free sawdust.
Yeah.
You know what? There would be one person a year who would walk up and be like, really?
Oh, well, there's definitely a market for sawdust with chicken poop in it. That's like a great thing for gardening.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So when you clean out the chicken coop and you
Yeah.
got the sawdust, yeah, that's gold.
I should just like sell it by the wheelbarrow full. $5 a wheelbarrow. Bring the wheelbarrow back when you're done.
Yeah, you can. The idea is that someone will come and take it without having to pay you to take it.
Oh, okay.
Or you have to pay them to take it. Yeah.
All right. Well, we got to work on our. We're not real good entrepreneurs here, I don't think.
No, we still have full-time jobs, so I think
there's that
is an
too,
indicator.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's answer some questions.
Right on.
Again. Let's see if let's see if we wander back to the notes I had from last time.
Okay.
All right. This first question is from Paul. Let's say one is making a wider panel or tabletop from solid stock so that a glue up is required to obtain the necessary width. When preparing the stock, I know there are valid reasons for ripping the boards into narrower strips. The board might be wider than your joiner, or the stock might be cupped enough that you will end up too thin if you try and remove all of the cup at once. Sometimes you see it said that by ripping the stock and flipping over every other board before gluing up, you will wind up with a panel that stays flatter. I don't like to do it that way because it makes hand planing a pain, but I understand the idea. But I've also heard it argued that ripping the boards into narrower strips and then gluing them back together in the same exact orientation, no flipping or rearranging, also results in a more stable panel. I don't think I buy this. If you rip a board in half and then glue it back together exactly as it was, that I think it will stay the same way and warp the same amount as it would have if you hadn't ripped it. But that's just my opinion, and I'd like to hear from some experts. Thanks for any light you can shed on this. I love the pod and the mag enough to be an unlimited member. P.S. Yes, I'm an engineer. So, engineers and woodworking, they just seem to go hand in hand, don't they?
Yes, they do. And I don't think that's a coincidence. So
why? Why do you think that is?
Because I think woodworking at its very core is an exercise in creative problem solving. Like, I think that it's a misnomer to think that you can read enough, watch enough YouTube videos, take enough classes to where you can go into your shop and not encounter a situation that you're not prepared for. I think there's always going to come a time where you're going to get in the shop, you're going to be faced with something and you say, how do I tackle that? And you might have a lot of experience. You may have, had a couple techniques or read something, but it really comes down to, you got to figure it out. And I think it's not a bad thing. To me, I think that's the biggest challenge is that, you'll come up against a roadblock. How the heck am I going to do that? And it can be even something that you've done a million times, but now that you started thinking about it, it's like gluing a shelf that's dadoed into a case side. Mm-hmm. That's easy enough. I've done that a million times. But there's a rabbet in the case side for the back, and the shelf has to be exactly flush with that inside edge of the rabbet. And glue and dados and wood, the thing slides around a little bit. And so now that I'm trying to come up with a way to tell other people to do it, it's like, I don't know, I've never thought about it, but yeah, that's super important. How do you do it? So, because what happens is if you glue the board in and let's say it's a little shy of the rabbet on one side, but it goes into the rabbet a little bit on the other side, you basically have a glue up where your sides are not in the same plane as the other. So it's more than just, something that's just slightly misaligned. Now your whole case is out of whack. So then I started thinking, well, I know I'm going to get a strip of wood, cover it in clear tape so glue doesn't stick, and I'm going to double stick tape that piece of wood into the rabbet at the back of the case, and then I can flush up the shelves to that block of wood in each rabbet, and then leave it a little bit wide in the fronts and then plane it down flush. So all of a sudden this problem that you've just sort of glossed over every time you've ever done it without any problem whatsoever, you've just turned this into like a a mountain of uncertainty in your mind. And I've just turned this into like this horribly complex process that now I'm going to tell everybody, this is what you need to do. Because if you don't, bad things can happen. When if you didn't even know that problem existed, you would probably be okay.
Yeah. Except when you're not, and then you're screwed.
Yes. Right.
And we're trying to get everyone to the finish line.
Yeah. So it's kind of that instance where, the more you think about it, and I think like the really good engineers, woodworking is almost more difficult for them because they really have an understanding of the situation at hand, the physics, and what can go wrong.
Yeah.
And I think some of the smartest people have the most complex solutions to simple situations. But then when you read about their solution and you read about why, all of a sudden you start to freak out too, because it's like, oh, I never considered that. All I know is that, sometimes this happens and I have to do this to fix it. You know what I mean? Instead of saying, why does that happen sometimes? Maybe you got to back up a bit and look at your process. So I don't know.
There's talking about smart people and complex solutions. So, what was it? 2 days ago, Barry and I drove up to New Hampshire to shoot another day with Tom McLaughlin. Drove up separately, drove up, 3.5 hour drive up, 8 hours shoot, 3.5 hour drive back. It's, long day, but, we get it done. But Tom McLaughlin is one of those guys who I think hits the next level of smart sometimes, maybe, where it's super simple solutions.
Yeah.
That come from it.
Yeah.
Or I don't want to like compare IQ levels or whatever, but there is smart people with complex solutions, and then there's smart people with the simplest solution. And wow, we're really getting off topic now.
Well, we already answered the question yesterday.
So. Yeah, I know. It's just unintelligible. But so there's a YouTuber that I follow, Jeremy Fielding, and he always talks about how an engineer wants to answer the problem with exactly the right amount of material. Extra material costs more and is too much or whatever. It's like, so he's always saying the simplest solution, the least number of steps with the least amount of material that covers your bases. That's like the perfect engineer right there.
Yeah.
But I see so many people or so many companies with something as simple as a drill press fence that is super, super, super complicated. And Tom McLaughlin's drill press fence, I looked at it and I was like, oh my goodness, this is it. He has it whittled down to the essence of what it needs to be. And it was a stick. He might have had F-clamps on it. There might have been wing nuts or whatever, but it was just a straight stick with a small rabbet on the bottom so that sawdust didn't get in between the workpiece. Yes. And it was like, this is the smartest drill press fence I've ever seen. I've seen others with more features and more whatever, but this is the essence of what this drill press fence needs to be. And that is like, oh, I love that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, my favorite woodworkers that I consider to have the most brilliant engineering minds are exactly that, like Michael Fortune, Steve Latta, Tim Coleman. When you see him build things, the best people break complex situations down into very, very simple steps. Mm-hmm. And it's always brilliant to watch, and I learn so much from that. So.
Yeah. All right. Question.
Yeah. Okay.
So ripping apart a board and gluing it back together in the same orientation.
Who is the question asker again?
Paul.
Okay, Paul, number one, you're on the right track. I think all of your instincts are sound. And number two, stop listening to what everybody is saying and wondering if it should make sense when it doesn't make sense to you.
4 people just turned the podcast off.
Yeah, probably the biggest thing, one of the pieces of conventional wisdom that I used to hear a lot that I don't necessarily follow is the notion of alternating each board, heart side down, heart side up, heart side down. So the idea being that as each one sort of bows or cups individually through, seasonal humidity changes, that they're going to counter each other out, and you're going to end up with more of a washboard of ripples, with each board doing its own thing, as opposed to everything aligned creating one massively large cup. Sounds good, but I actually I think it's much, much easier to control the movement of a single cup across the surface than it is all the little multiple guys, because you can, a table with aprons or a trestle table where you have, little cross stretchers or cleats going underneath. They do a really good job of keeping a panel flat. So in terms of this notion of ripping boards apart and then gluing them right back up, I don't see any benefit to that except for the ones that you already raised. Either it's too wide to flatten on the joiner, and there are some workarounds for that if you want to create a sled that you can support the piece and run it through the planer to kind of flatten one face and all that kind of stuff, which might be worth your while. If it's only an inch or two wider than my jointer, I just take the guard off, set it for a heavy cut, I make one pass, and it leaves a mostly flat surface with this lip along the one edge, which was wider than my joiner blades. And then I just get like a narrow piece of plywood or MDF 8 inches wide, the length of the board, and set the board on it, the plane surface down, so that little lip is now sort of suspended in air, and you can plane the opposite side, get that flat, then flip it over, and then you can plane off that lip. So again, we're sort of digressing, but the other thing you mentioned was that a board with a severe cup on a wide board, by the time you flatten that, you're going to be removing a lot of material, ripping that into multiple strips, planing each one and gluing it back up. You're going to save a lot of thickness on that board. So, there are instances where that's a super good thing. For me, the main thing is the way the piece looks once it's glued up. I think that's super important. The other consideration is how easy is this thing to hand plane, meaning is a grain going in the same direction on each board? Because if you're not careful and you do have some grain direction mismatch between boards and it changes right at a glue line, it's super tough to avoid getting tear out on one side or the other, depending on how you're planing. However, the notion of ease of planing and how something looks, those aren't necessarily unrelated or independent of each other, meaning you're going to sacrifice one or the other, because if the grain on the boards are diving in different directions on either side of the glue line, that chatoyance or luster when the light hits it is going to be different from board to board. So even if the grain itself has a good match, as you kind of walk around the table and the light hits it from different angles, one of those boards is going to look light while the other one looks dark, just because of the way the light is refracting off of the kind of the translucent material. And then as you walk around, it's going to change. So if they're oriented so all the grain is going in the same direction, which makes it easier for planing, it's also going to look less conspicuous. I mean, sometimes you want conspicuous, if you're doing like a sunburst veneer and you want to book match that, and then you have this grain really diving in at different angles and the chatoyance is different, and it really highlights the pattern of that sort of veneer work or marquetry or parquetry. But typically in a panel glue up, you're kind of looking for something which is less conspicuous, not drawing attention to the glue lines. I'm never trying to fake the look that, hey, this is one wide board and not glued up, but I think you can still end up with something that's pleasant to the eye, short of looking like a single board. So grain direction, obviously sapwood, obviously what the grain, the rings are looking like as they meet the joint. All those things are super important. Ben, you had talked about the notion of slip matching versus book matching. I think this was something you picked up from Tom McLaughlin when you were up there.
Yeah, and I will, the day that this episode comes out tomorrow, I have to finish editing a masterclass video today too to release tomorrow. It's a video of him doing just that. Looking at a board, taking a wide board, and he's got an 11-inch wide board, needs a 20.5-inch top, and figuring out how he's going to glue that up to get this top. Now, keep in mind, it's a shaker dresser, so it's simple. Generally not flamboyant with their grain selections and things like that, which, that style can handle that, but he's going for a seamless glue up, or not a seamless glue up, but a visibly seamless glue up.
Yeah, sure.
And it's just him taking the board and figuring out the orientation, and he winds up with a slip joint. And I've known about slip joints, and people talk about slip joints, and Tim Coleman did a really great article a couple of years back on, I think it was like 4 different ways of joining, matching, grain matching. And until I shot this video with Tom, I never really saw how powerful a slip joint could be, where you wind up with a top that is, it doesn't look like a single board because the grain isn't, trees don't do that.
Sure.
But you can't really tell where the glue line is. And just like him reading that board and saying, oh, I see the grain coming out this way and it's doing that. And it's really, really powerful, a slip joint. And it really made me rethink. I think for years, the holy grail was a book match. And there's still times when I'm going for that book match, especially on instrument backs, and, try and get like that sap line to perfectly book match so that you get the mirror image, and it's just really fun.
Yeah.
But a slip joint, that's going to be firmly embedded in my hip pocket from now on, because that's a great way of gluing up boards, while maintaining hand planability and the chatoyance of grain direction from both sides. And he talks about all that in the video. So I'll definitely post a link in the show notes.
Yeah. So the idea, just to, explain a slip match versus a book match. A book match is if you have, let's say, 2 boards sawn from the same log, or let's say, 2 lengths cut from the same board, which I think for a lot of tabletops or something is kind of more common. But anyway, so if you have 2 boards cut from the same log and you open them up like a book, that's where you're going to get the grain running in different directions. You're going to get this symmetry, which I don't necessarily like, because it does draw a lot of attention to that glue line where the grain is coming in different directions. The other option is to take those 2 leaves and slide them apart. So you're maintaining the same orientation, and what you get is a consistent grain running. And if you have a board that, let's say it's a plain sawn board, but the grain, the rings are diving down at an angle toward the end, so you have these edges with the straight riff sawn grain. If you do a slip match and you're matching riff sawn grain to riff sawn grain on the edges, that's going to be pretty seamless.
Yeah.
And the one thing is, if you do a slip match and the boards have a little cathedral to them, and you slip match them, you're still going to end up with those double arches, like the little McDonald's arches. However, if you slip match them, you can flip one board end for end, and you still have consistent grain orientation. But now the cathedrals are going in opposite directions, and what you have is this big sort of S pattern going across the tabletop, and you have this, this angled grain going across the glue joint, which really does a great job of minimizing the look of the glue joint. So I'll either try to do a straight slip. If it doesn't look, I'll flip it. Where that doesn't work is, let's say you've got a board which you have riff sawn on one edge, but then almost say more plain sawn on the other edge. So now if you slip it, you're going to have a rift sawn edge matching a plain sawn edge. That's where it doesn't look good. That's where I may start to break my own rules, rotate it around to maybe get the plain sawn surfaces together or the rift sawn surfaces together, whatever is going to give me a better glue line. And my grain's going in the wrong direction, but sometimes that's your best choice. So I don't think there's ever an easy single answer. I think I always get to the point where I come up with the least bad solution. And then by the time I'm done, I'm really happy with it, but it just feels like at the time, that's the best I can do. Oh, well. And then you move on to the next thing. Oh, that's the best I can do. Oh, well. And then, but I still think that's a really powerful way to end up with good furniture is working toward the point of frustration, calling it good, and then moving on. As long as you're sort of exhibiting that mindfulness and sweating over each thing, I think you're better off than not paying attention to it until you put finish on it. And then all of a sudden you wonder what color stain you need to hide all of these weird things that are happening. So.
Yeah. And, make it look right. And if you need to take it to a wide belt sander, that's what you need to do. It's worth $30 for a piece of, for a tabletop to get wide belt sanded or something. That's
exactly. Yeah. Or your poor man's wide belt sander is 3 or 4 scrapers, sharpen them all up. You got a bunch of edges.
It's good practice.
Put some duct tape on your thumbs to keep them from heating up and go at it.
Yeah. But the only thing that I can think of from and maybe I'm sure that somebody can chime in and leave a comment and let us know what the thinking of is for ripping apart a board and gluing it back together. Would the glue lines add strength, cupping and twisting wise, or no? It's what world are we living in? No, that's
yeah. I don't know. Yeah, if someone says no, this is the reason why. So, I can't think of it.
I can't think of a good reason either.
I have been known to rip really wide boards in half to joint and plane them and glue them back up, but not intentionally taking something that I could manage milling and ripping it just for the sake of doing that. I don't see it. And the other thing is when you're woodworking, the whole point is to get something temporarily flat because everything is moving, as you speak. So the idea is you mill all your parts straight and square and flat, you assemble it, and then you depend on the assembly itself, the construction method, to then hold those pieces flat. So the idea that trying to dovetail bowed boards is super hard, but if you can dovetail them while they're flat and then basically bang them together into a dovetailed case, the dovetails are going to do the job holding them flat for you. So
there's rarely, I can't think of a good reason why a wide board is left untethered.
Yeah.
Outside of a plank door, maybe. Yeah. But again, you could put battens on the back to hold it flat, or there's always something there to keep it in line.
Yeah, so. I think so.
All right. Let's see. Question number 2 is from Kevin. Over the last couple of years, I've been fitting up a 20 by 24 shop, and I pretty much have most of the things I need, but I've been on the fence about adding a router table. My space is about the size of Mike's, and though I've got room for a router table, everything is a spatial and tool compromise at this point. For example, in the space I'd be putting the table in, I can alternatively add more lumber storage or a spindle disc sander or a small CNC machine. I'm curious how others feel about having a dedicated router table and how often they get used. Told you. My kid walked in.
Do you need to take a break?
Nope.
Okay.
I give him this and he walks in and goes tells mom what crazy thing he just did.
I kind of wanted to hear it. I'd say a router table is a really valuable thing to have. And if you have enough floor space where you can burn, 4 square feet with a stationary router table, I'd definitely go for it. But short of that, I do think it's important because just taking a handheld router and mounting it upside down and attaching it to a board with a hole in it, and it basically turns it in from a mobile machine, which is really, really useful in a lot of circumstances, to a stationary machine, which is really, really useful in a lot of different circumstances. And I think it really, they become functionally two different machines in terms of what you can do and the way you use them. So I definitely think, yeah, router tables in your future. I don't use mine all that often, but when I use it, I still don't enjoy using it. I probably it's one of the least satisfying things to use in terms of noise and dust. However,
yeah, but if I'm using a noisy, dusty router, I prefer it table mounted.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think
I really don't enjoy using handheld routers.
No, I don't.
That's no fun.
Yeah, so. So I've got a super small shop. I don't have room for a floor standing router table. I do have a benchtop router table. And so it doesn't have maybe quite the table surface. I think it's like a 22 by 16 top, which is on the small side, but I find it's fine. I'm not running 10-foot lengths of trim stock, cutting coves or thumbnails for base molding or something like that.
Yeah.
The longest thing I'm doing is I might be routing profiles in chair legs or something like that. So you end up with a pretty long, pretty heavy jig with hold downs and work pieces. It's definitely doable. However, even though it's a benchtop model, it still has a cast iron router lift. It still has a 3-horse motor in it. So it's still, and it weighs like 100 pounds. So I used to keep it under a counter and have to hoist it out. I'm done with that. So it does live on this sort of mobile rolling cart. So, which is by default, in essence, I have a router table because
it isn't living on that tippy Harbor Freight.
No.
Okay. All right. No. You've got this one cart that I look at it and it wants to fall over.
It's funny you should say that because right now, because I'm working on my book, I'm doing a lot of photos. So I have a lot of props. I have a lot of things okay, done with that. Where do I put it? On the cart. Okay, done with that. Where do you put it? On the cart.
Can't take it, man.
It's about 7 feet high of stuff precariously tipped, and you just breathe on it and it just wobbles side to side.
That is the sketchiest cart I've ever seen.
So anyway, yeah, router table, floor standing. I get that you don't have the space, but bang together a really quick benchtop thing. In fact, the book I'm working on, I didn't really want to go there, but I said, you know what? A router table, they can be super expensive to buy, and they're good, but you can end up spending $1,200 on a router table, and that is not including the router lift or the motor. So you're going to spend $300 or $400 more bucks on a router lift, and then maybe a couple $100 on a router motor. To me, that's a significant barrier to entry, unless it's I've been doing this for years. I really want to step up. That's good. However, you can bang together a benchtop router table from a quarter sheet of plywood in literally less than 2 hours, and bolt on a fixed base router to the underside, and you have a router table for basically, if you already have the router around, it's going to cost you, $30 for a quarter sheet of plywood in an afternoon, and there it is. So I don't think there's a monetary excuse for not having a router table. It's not going to have the bells and whistles of a router lift and a big heavy duty motor, but a little benchtop model with a 1.5 horse DeWalt router, that served me really well for a lot of years.
I think that curve flattens out. The more money you spend, you're not necessarily getting an equal amount back. Once you stick any old router on the other side of a piece of plywood with a hole drilled in it, that usefulness to money curve goes straight through the roof. You start adding more money, it is nice. When we had the old shop and we had that beautiful Jessam lift,
Yeah.
Oh,
With the 3-horse quarter cable motor in that thing.
What a luxury. And I just remember being like, this is nirvana.
Yeah.
You know, it had the vacuum mounted, you know, a dedicated vacuum mounted in the base and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
And when I moved into this shop, I thought that was going to be one of the things that really, really drove me nuts. Not having a nice router lift, not having a big, heavy table with big top and all that. And the more I worked, it was like, you know what? That's really nice, but a sheet of plywood with a hole drilled in it and the router stuck to the other side of it, that's kind of getting the job done most of the time.
Yeah. And I think there's that gray area between like super cheap and simple and doing a good job to super heavy duty micro adjust router lift. It lets you do all your bit changes from above the table, which is really nice. It has a series of the ring inserts of different diameters that lock in and are super level. And, you know, there's a big powerful motor. That's really the other end of the spectrum. You can still stick that in a shop made router table, you know, and save some of the cost. But then you have a good motor, lower vibration. You're typically using 1/2-inch shank bits and something like that. So it's just going to be a lot smoother. There is a benefit there, but like going halfway in between, I think you can get stuck in that money performance black hole. Like for instance, there's a lot of routers marketed as being suitable to use in a router table. Typically they're plunge routers. They have some mechanism where you can unlock and lift the base up and down from the top. Mm-hmm. And we did a review on those. And one of the woodworker I work with every year, he had a model that was chosen like one of the best in the review, but I hated using that thing. It's like a ton of vibration, super loud. The cuts were like really chattery. And I was really surprised because it wasn't what I experienced at my router table. And I basically told him, it's like, you gotta get a router lift and a router. And, you know, so, and that's one of those things where, you know, a simple little router and a plywood table in a way did a much better job than that.
Yeah. I can see that
medium path, but then you go up to that next level and it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's kind of nice. So.
I've never, I have a 1 3/4 horse DeWalt, with 2 bases. It's a plunge base and a non-plunge base. He's back. And, I have never found myself wanting for power. I don't know. It's like, you know, I'm not doing like huge, you know, those door bits, those door profile,
the big old wing.
Yeah.
Cutters.
You know, I'm not 90% of the time there's a flush cut bit in there with bearing on top and the bearing on the bottom. And then sometimes I pull it out and try and think what else goes in there. Not much, you know? So I think the 3 horsepower router, great. And these are all things like if I walked in somebody's shop and they had the $5,000 router table, I'd be like, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I would not hold it against anyone for having a killer router table setup. It's just for me, I've never needed the extra power. I've always gotten by with sticking my hand under and trying to get it adjusted to the right height and everything. And my router table is in the wing of my table saw.
Oh, that's perfect. So there's no space sacrifice there at all. And
honestly, and you know, Kevin, is it worth the thing? I did have a dedicated router table, that I took the router top off of, cut it down, put it in the wing of the table saw, and expanded the base to make drawers and just another tabletop. I didn't think it was worth the footprint in my shop. I needed more storage than I needed a router table. Just that's the way it works for me, but it's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah.
But
and sometimes the issues where the size of the router bigger isn't necessarily better. I really like those DeWalt. I think Porter Cable has one, maybe Makita, but they have trim routers where you can get both a fixed base and a plunge base with them. I love that little router with a plunge base for small stuff like hinge mortises or, routing out, recesses for inlay or something like that. Much nicer to either balance on an edge or work into an area than hoisting a big 3-horse plunge router, which I do have.
Yeah.
The other thing, and I think you mentioned this yesterday as well, a really good solution if you want to bang together a router table is get a combo kit router. So it's a regular, mid-sized router that comes with a plunge base and a fixed base, and you screw the fixed base to the bottom of your router table. So now you have a plunge router to use by hand, which I think is super important and useful to have. And then you can pull the motor out and shove it into the fixed base, and you have a router table without having to goof around with anything.
Well, and I'm going to take my headphones off for a minute because one aspect. This is great audio right here. As I knock into the microphone. One awesome thing about that is, so I don't have a plate. I just have a piece of MDF. The whole thing is half-inch MDF.
You made your own plate.
I made my own plate.
You can do that? What?
Yeah, when you're broke enough. But sometimes you want a really wide base for like rabbiting a case that's already assembled or something.
Yeah.
A really wide base is nice. Yeah. So my fixed base, I will take the whole plate out and use it as a wide-based router.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Aww.
It's about the size of a ping pong table for the people who weren't watching it.
Yeah, but it works. There are times when like that has saved the day because you wind up if the wider a base is, but I've got to go handheld.
Oh yeah,
the wider the base is, the more stable it's going to be.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you're all of my trim routers that I use for usually routing the waste between pins and dovetailing, I have a oversized rectangular offset base, so I have a ton of support, over the surface of, I use a routing jig over the surface of the jig, and the same thing there. If you're routing profiles on the edge of a board or something, you have that really big support to keep that flat.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Very cool.
All right, let's take a break.
Okay.
Here's a fan favorite, Gary Rogowski from the Northwest Woodworking Studio, here to tell you about their new online mastery program.
Thanks, Ben. The Online Mastery Program is a new distance learning version of our mastery classes that have run now for 20 years. We train folks in both design and furniture making techniques using a full kit of tools from hand to power tools. Our goal is to teach people how to make great furniture. Over our 2 years together, people will design and build 11 pieces. Students work from their own shops, meeting online with me for 3 trimesters each year with weekly lectures, videos, and discussions. Our first online group started in the fall, and it's been great. I want to point out that this program is not just for seasoned woodworkers, though. We take on all levels but true beginners, anyone with a desire to deepen their understanding of the craft and who commit to building a lot of great work. The requirement is that you work from your own shop with your tools and a good internet connection and camera, so you can join our class each week on Zoom. Invest in yourself. Invest in your education.
All right, so we did our segments, our all-time favorite whatever yesterday, but I'm going to change mine today because I have a smooth move now.
Oh, all right. Oh, in that short a time, in a 24-hour span. Okay.
Yeah, not even. Yeah. So I am finishing 4 ukuleles at a time right now, and normally I've just about always French polished or shellacked. We'll say fancy shellacked them. I just came up with a new term. It's half-assed French polishing, fancy shellac. But this time I needed to build it faster, and I wanted it to be a little bit more of a robust finish. So I decided to go with wipe on poly. And I'm doing 4 at a time. So, just every day I pull one, pull them down, sand them, then just go through them. And I've got them hanging up on my ceiling. I've got 4 screws in the ceiling and just a bunch of ukuleles hanging around.
Oh, cool.
Well, one of them I must have wiped it on a little too thick, and I pull it down to sand it and put another coat on yesterday, and I have it sitting on my bench, and it was one of those, I don't know if I would have noticed it if it wasn't just sitting there for a minute. And I walked by and there was something out of the corner of my eye that was like, what is that? And there was a huge drip mark.
Wow.
Where the finish had run down and formed a drip, and it was 1/8 of an inch thick. And it was like, oh no, what am I going to do? I'm making these ukes for other people, so I want them to be right. And I was really annoyed at myself, and I thought, am I going to have to sand this down and start over again? I took out a single edge razor blade and cut the drip mark off and trimmed it back as much as I possibly could. And then used that same razor blade to scrape the surround of it down. And
awesome.
You wipe on another piece. I've never been successful in getting rid of a big glumpy finish mess before.
Yeah.
And I kind of think it was I bought a pack of 100 razor blades just for this, so that it's like, use it and throw it away because it's no longer as sharp as you want it to be.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that
awesome.
was it. Yeah.
That's not a smooth move. That's a favorite technique of all time. It's all in branding, I think.
Yeah, sure. Okay. There's a good spin. But yeah.
That's good. I don't know where. I think maybe Terry Masachi covered that years ago in a Finishing Mistakes article. I think I've seen Garrett Hack use a little tiny razor blade as a scraper or something. So as you were talking, it's like, I hope that's what he did. And then the fact you did and that it actually worked was super cool. I was afraid that shellac eventually would probably be too brittle for that, but you probably got it when it was still a little malleable.
Well, it's poly.
Poly. Okay.
So it was poly after 24 hours of drying.
Oh yeah. Okay. So that's definitely, you can carve through that pretty well.
Yeah, there was, it was definitely, the exterior of it was hard. As you cut through, the inside was still uncured.
Yes.
But it was hard enough, and maybe I just nailed it on the timing. It was hard enough that the outside of the bubble was hard. What is, polymerized or whatever, so that I could scrape it away. I think in the past, maybe I've tried it too soon, maybe, and it doesn't scrape. It just kind of peels, and then you're in the real bad territory.
Yes.
So you got to find it at the right time.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. What you? Oh, I know what you had. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm changing it though.
Oh, this is like a whole different recording. We're even talking about stuff we didn't talk about.
Was this podcast or last podcast where we were talking about engineering problems and thinking too much and creating more difficult solutions?
That was like 46 minutes ago.
Okay, so that was today. So this is sort of plays up on that theme. I had mentioned going through extra lengths to make sure that this little case with dadoed shelves glued up straight, taking something I hadn't thought about and investing a lot more effort. Well, to sort of counterbalance that and keep the equilibrium even in the woodworking world, the way I went about cutting the dados in those shelves was a much different and more straightforward method than I normally do, where if I'm dadoing multiple parts and the dados need to line up part to part, I use a crosscut sled with a dado blade, and then I use a stop to, register one shelf with the stop, cut one piece, do the second piece against the same stop. And there were like 4 shells, so it's like 4 dados. So I thought, can I use 2 stops? So with one setup, I can do one, and then the other, so you start to get more and more complex with the stops. So these, the case side, they're only like 5.5 inches wide. So I said, forget the stops. I put both pieces down on my crosscut sled, aligned them end to end, and threw a couple pieces of blue tape across the joint where they meet. And it does an amazing job to keep them aligned in terms of sliding. And then I just mark the, pretty accurate, but not exact data locations where I wanted them on just the leading edge of the leading board. Align that with the kerf in my sled, because of course I took my normal sled, mounted a 1/2-inch dado blade, and just cut a big old trough in there, which I'm going to have to fix. But it's a super clean, zero clearance little kerf right now. So I just lined up the pencil mark with that and hit it. And if I was off by a 64th of an inch here or there, it doesn't matter because they're in the same place. So to go from, super simple glue up to super complex was evened out by going from a super complex dadoing setup to super easy. Couple pieces of tape, pencil mark, go. So
you know who did that? And it's watch this. A free video workshop right now, because Barry wrote an e-letter for, he's helped me out and wrote a couple so that we can pile up and have them stashed away for the holiday. But he wrote an e-letter about how great Garrett Heck's little small tool cabinet is. The video workshop. And Garrett does that. I think he tapes all the pieces together, runs all the dados at once, and there's no way that they're not going to match then.
There you go. I knew I probably got it from somewhere.
I don't mean to discredit.
Yeah, no, not at all. So it worked super well. So it's like get past the technique to the aim of the technique, and like what problem needs to be solved. The dados need to be in the same place. Okay, yeah. Couple different ways to go about doing it. Great big piece like a shaker chimney cupboard. That's just rabbet and dado construction too. But you're dealing with 12-inch wide by 60-inch long case sides. Ain't no taping those parts together. So stop blocks worked out really well there. So it has to do with, not just what you're doing, but also the scale of the parts comes into play as well. Lots of different challenges.
You know what this brings up, and it ties the whole episode together kind of, is that sometimes a lot, like when you did your little letter tray thing, your bill organizer, and we did a video on stopped dados and how you did that on the table saw. A lot of people say, why wouldn't you just do this on the router table? And router table is a great method for dados and stop dados and all sorts of things. But the size of the piece dictates the tool you use to do it. And router fences generally do not get far enough away from the bit on most tables to allow you to do a lot of case joinery without having to move the fence between sides or piece to piece. And that's when you're working smaller projects, I think a router table becomes more usable and eventually indispensable.
Yeah.
When you're doing larger projects like a shaker chimney cupboard or chest of drawers or whatever, that's when you start leaning on your table saw and your handheld router more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that was a really good, those little size, that organizers I'm looking at now, they're only like 6 inches high by 12 inches wide with some stop 3/16 dados in there. It's like that. I don't like to do stop dados on a router table are fine in skinny stock. Like if I'm doing a frame and panel door and I need to do stopped panel grooves, even then I'll try not to use a straight bit because of physics of like a 1/4 inch diameter straight bit cutting a groove. on a router table, it's not really efficient way to go. And also, as you're routing using a straight bit any distance away from the fence, if the workpiece comes away from the fence a little bit and it really contacts the inside cutter, which is moving away from you, it will yank that board forward. So I don't know if I've ever done that. It's always like this. It's a yeah, and it's never clean cut. So if I am doing stop grooves, especially in like a door frame part, I'd like to use a wing cutter, which is buried into the fence. I think that was my smooth move in my last
your wing cutter was backwards. That's right.
Yeah, because it's backwards. When it's not backwards, it's a much more efficient cutting action than a single spinning bit because of the diameter of the cutter, the way it enters the cut and makes the cut. So in that same fashion, I typically like to do stop grooves or dados. A lot of times I'll use a handheld router with a fence, a plunge router and a fence. I think that's a really good way to go about doing that. But these pieces were just too small to clamp down to a tabletop and then still be able to balance a router on top without getting in the way of the clamps or whatever. So in that case, you're right. The table saw was the best way to do it.
Well, and also the way that you have the stop blocks in place and everything, it just really, you're just stacking every odd in your favor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like if you can't make it a safe operation, then don't do it. And my criteria for what a safe operation is getting, I don't know, what's the word, broader and broader, or the bar is lower and lower. Meaning it's just like things that I would get away with on my own when I was younger, I wouldn't get away with on my own now. And the things that I might get away with on my own now, I wouldn't teach a class to do or show in an article. And then that further informs the way I would naturally go about doing it. Because it's like, Mike, if you're not going to tell someone else to do it this way, why are you doing it this way? So what's up? What's going on in the shop there, man?
Hey, Roz. I'm recording a podcast. Let's see if he gets the door closed. He can't get the door closed. That's what's going on.
It looked like he was super careful closing the door. He just
keeps. There's snow piled up against it, and you can't close it all the way. Yeah.
Speaking of that, so we had a pretty, the biggest snowstorm of the year so far. A good foot of snow, heavy snow, a lot of wind. It's a nor'easter, I guess. So I woke up this morning and I looked out to my garage, and my garage door was kicked open about a foot. Because I just have one of those latches, my door latch, I have to slam it 4 times just to make sure it's really stuck. And obviously it wasn't. And so I had like this drift about 2 feet high, like going into the shop. And not only that, of course, my propane heater heats my shop. And when the door is closed, it does a really good job. But it was like, it was 22 degrees out with the door kicked open 12 inches. So I have.
So your big like carriage door was open?
No, just the walkout door.
Oh, okay.
So I don't even want to go look at my propane tank because.
Hopefully. Man, it's $2.50 a gallon too. That could
250. Where are you getting your propane at?
The hardware store. Well, you get it delivered.
Yeah, it's like $4.50 a gallon right now. Yeah, it's brutal. So,
yeah. All right.
Anyway, well, enough said. So that was
sorry. Yeah. Wintertime in Connecticut.
Yes.
Well, let's answer. Let's answer a couple. We have one question. That's assembled from two wood questions.
Okay.
First one is from Charles, and I love Charles's attitude in this question. What do you folks think of hickory for a glued up slab, 2 inches by 18 inches by 73 inches, with a 3 3/4 inch wraparound of ash? I live in North Carolina, used to live in Connecticut, and I am a 74-year-old apprentice and will never stop learning. Man, that attitude gets your question answered on the podcast every single time. I love that.
Yeah.
So there was one word that scared me in Charles's question.
Hickory or wraparound?
It was wraparound, but
Yeah.
I don't know much about hickory at all.
Ooh.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Rough stuff?
Hickory is great green. It like splits really easy. It's probably like the preferred wood for like your traditional ladder back chairs and stuff.
Okay.
But man, once it dries, it's pretty rough. It's super tough.
Like dull's blades or
Yeah.
just hard to work?
Hard, just heavy and nasty. One of our contributing editors, I won't mention his name, Raleigh Johnson, he was like years ago. He was just like saying, man, I got a great deal on a whole pallet of hickory. And it was just kind of like, I don't know how many years later, he still had that thing. And I think he just said, yeah, I finally got rid of that hickory. So I don't know. It's pretty, in a big old tabletop. I mean, it looks nice. I think it's pretty, if you work it, it's just, it's pretty heavy. It's pretty hard. It's a workout.
It takes a commitment.
Yeah, it does. It's not something, and I'm like a huge fan of white oak, not a problem. Hickory, I'm going to think about that a little bit. Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know.
So good luck with that big old thing. And then the wraparound. Yeah. So if you have a solid slab, and the wraparound to me says you might be like mitering this thing all the way around. If you're not allowing for seasonal movement, you're gonna run into trouble there. But if you have more sort of, I guess, end grain pieces, short grain pieces running along the ends of the board, and so they can sort of expand and contract.
Or have it in a groove.
Or if it's like a floating panel or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. Good luck, Charles.
Yeah.
The next one is from David.
What you could do, here's a solution. So if you want sort of the look of a wraparound, is just edge glue the ash, right?
Yeah.
Long grain pieces, just edge glue them to the hickory board. So now you just have a big old board, single board, and then treat the ash on the end grain like a breadboard end.
Yeah.
So
don't miter it.
Don't miter it. No, you can't miter it, but you can just have that sort of extend past the edges, just sort of like a breadboard end, and just, maybe have sort of a tongue and groove or something and just sort of bolt it in the center or some elongated holes on the ends and plug it. There's a lot of ways to, but if you treat it like a breadboard end and allow that big old hickory panel edged with ash to expand and contract, you're going to be okay. And you're still going to have that two-tone look if that's what you're going for.
Yeah. Cool.
Good luck with that. Let us know how that turns out.
Yeah. All right. So from David, I was given several, in quotation marks, walnut slabs that I suspect are actually butternut due to the light color and distinctive walnut grain pattern. That one confused me.
Yeah, they look really similar.
I guess they do. I plan to use this generous donation to build a shaker-style workbench in the spring. If it is butternut, would you still use it to build a workbench? And I should have asked David whether this was for the base or the top.
Yeah, right. As Garrett Hack says, butternut is walnut's country cousin. That's one of my favorite phrases of his. I love butternut. It does have the same grain structure as walnut. It's definitely more of a golden color, and it's also a lot softer. It has a specific gravity close to pine. So I wouldn't use walnut or butternut for a bench top. I think walnut is too dark. I think that'd be a problem. And I think butternut is probably going to be too soft. I think for structural members, it's fine if you like the look of butternut. And I think it's okay. I might save the butternut for drawer fronts or door panels or something like that. I love butternut. I wouldn't treat it like, I can get rid of it by using it here. Save it for something else. But, I understand. It's like, I got this wood. This is the wood I'm using for my bench. Yeah. Can I still use it? The answer is sure. Yeah, no problem. I think it'd be fine.
There are some who argue that a soft bench top is good for protecting your pieces because it'll keep you from denting. If you've got any wood crumbs, it'll dent the bench top as opposed to the piece. Oh, I have a smooth move there too. But so there's that. Butternut is really light. So if you were like weight wise, so that would make great anything. Like you used it in your tool chest, right? In your little travel tool cabinet?
Exactly. Because I wanted something light without going to a pine. So.
Yeah. The only time I've ever worked butternut was when we had the offcuts in the old shop, and it was great because it was just like communal scrap. Yeah, that you'd be sitting there like, oh, I need a little teeny tiny piece of piece of butternut that was probably a scrap from one of your projects or something like that. It works beautifully.
Yes,
it's fun to work with hand tools.
Yes, it is. It's like when I first used butternut, it's like, oh, this is really fuzzy. It's hard to finish and it's blotchy. And then when I learned how to sharpen a hand plane, oh, butternut is wonderful luster. Yeah, it is really pretty.
It's got the funness of like hand planing pine. There are few things more fun in the world than hand planing pine.
Yeah,
it's kind of got that thing going on. So
yes, but then you have the added benefit of this luster that comes up once you hand plane the butternut. So you get that added. Yeah, it's gorgeous. I was doing for my book. I'm doing a take on a little cabinet I made for our downstairs bathroom years ago, kind of a medicine cabinet that
I need a medicine cabinet,
that I'm using dado joinery, which yes, I'm repurposing this piece many times throughout our conversation. However, I made the original out of butternut, and it was a board that I bought from Garrett Hack when I was up on a photo shoot up there early in my tenure, because he has a big barn full of lumber and stuff. It's like, hey, Garrett, you got any wood you want to sell? So it was like a super special board. The back panels were like tiger maple that I got from Garrett as well. So I'm designing a piece sort of based on that. And I thought, oh, well, what kind of wood do I want to use? Because I got tons of ash, I got white oak, I even have some walnut, I even have some shedua. I'm thinking, what is this cabinet going to look good in? And it's just like, it's got to be butternut, because that's like at the core of this piece. It's like I couldn't envision it in anything else. It's like, really? I've got all this other wood. Sorry, Mike. Go get some butternut. So fortunately, I hit up Bob Van Dyke. I ran up and he had a couple extra boards I could snag off of him. So thanks again, Bob, for that. But it's funny how you think of wood as being this arbitrary choice, and it's not. It's just had to be that. So like for that low dresser I made for the magazine, I used white oak for the legs and like the rails and stuff. And then I used butternut for all the side panels and the drawer fronts. And that was a super nice combination. So that was kind of, and also the top was white oak as well. So I really like that combination of woods. I think I really got the luster of the butternut and the finer grain, which I think complemented the oak really well and definitely took it away from an arts and crafts to more of a contemporary look. But in that particular case, I didn't feel comfortable using butternut for the main structural pieces. Not that they couldn't have supported it, but just in my mind, it just didn't have that real strength and toughness to it. I almost felt that the whole piece would look a little bit soft, almost like a green and green piece made out of mahogany. It really demanded that all the edges have these really soft roundovers and pillow pins. It's just because that wood just inspired that softer treatment to it. And for me, this butternut would have been the same way, in that if I would have used the butternut for the structural pieces, I think it just would have demanded an overall softer approach and look to the piece, which wasn't what I had in mind. So,
well, yeah. So good on you for having a bunch of butternut, if that's what it is. Yeah. If it's not, good on you for having a bunch of walnut.
Yeah, if you got a bunch of, if you have a bunch of 8-quarter butternut and you live in the New England area,
email us at shoptalk@taunton.com.
That's right.
Mike will buy it off you. Yeah. All right, so let's see. We've got a 5-star review on iTunes. Thank you for all of the 5-star reviews. I read them all. I read all the bad reviews too. They go a little deeper sometimes, but Let's see. Did I tell you about? I'm not gonna. Let's see. From Jason, he gave us a 5-star review. Listen to the podcast in order from oldest to newest, and I'm finally current. How long does that take? That's got to take a while.
Yeah.
Long time. Love episodes where Ben, Mike, and Anissa are on together. We have a great time with those too.
Thanks.
As it seems to be a great combo and wealths of knowledge. Thank you for all that you do. Truly inspiring and motivating for those of us who need to get that push to get out into the shop in the evenings after a long day at the job. Keep it up. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, thanks.
I have a random recommendation for all.
Right on.
I didn't change from yesterday. Get a 3D printer. If it pops into your head like, wouldn't it be cool if you had a 3D printer? Go get a cheap 3D printer. I think the 3D printer I have is like $200. And if you have the means, it is awesome. I use it all the time. It is not as much of a rabbit hole as you fear it to be. So,
yeah, even though you said that yesterday, my reaction to you saying that again right now is exactly the same. Like, oh, what are you? It immediately got stressed out because it's like, oh no, I can't even go there. So.
I don't geek out over it. I don't do anything. I come up with an idea, either model it or download it from Thingiverse and just go print it. So it is magic.
All right. That's super cool.
All right.
You made me a glue bottle opener.
I never gave it to you.
And you haven't given it to me yet.
No.
So I'm just saying.
I keep thinking about dropping it off on your porch for Hanukkah or something, but like it's not. I come across it all the time, and I go, oh.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a friend who helped me with my kitchen remodel, like, I don't know, 12 or 13 years ago, and he left this little folding, step ladder behind, and I still have it. And every time I use it, I feel really bad. It's like, oh, I got to give this back to Chris. It's like, oh, dang it. And it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I need to resolve this because it's still an issue.
Life is full of those. Yeah.
So Chris, if you're still missing a ladder, which I don't think you are, because hopefully you would have replaced it, I still feel bad about it. And I owe you something for that. So
there is something high on the kitchen cabinet that he cannot reach. And he looks at it and he thinks of you every time.
Yes. Where did I leave that?
Pekovich!
Because I wouldn't have used this chair and I wouldn't have broken my ankle that one time.
All right. Well, that's all for this episode of Shop Talk Live. If you have any questions you'd like us to answer on the show, send them into shoptalk@taunton.com. Quick note, we will not be releasing an episode in 2 weeks. It is January 2nd, and I am off, and I'm barely getting this one out, so I can't get 2 out. We'll be back in 2 weeks with wow, it just comes out. It just comes out. We'll be back in a bit with another episode. Thanks for listening.
Happy New Year, Ben.
You too, man. I'll talk to you later.
Not much going on this holiday season? Join Fine Woodworking Unlimited. With more than 40 years of content, we promise to sharpen your skills and keep you entertained through the holidays and beyond.
Can I get a clap out of you? Just a single one, actually.
Sing it? What? No, I thought you said just sing a little, and I panicked.
La la la.